Right, we are live. Now, I'm just going to give it about 30 seconds for people to come in. I'm conscious that we've got about 30 minutes, so I'm not going to leave it too long, but let's just at least let a few people come in first. So, for anybody that's in already, we're also streaming to Twitch and YouTube simultaneously through the magic of StreamYard. So, if you do have any issues with LinkedIn lagging or freezing up or anything, which does happen, then you can find those links in the chat or in the comments for this event. I always give a shout out to my mysterious single Twitch viewer, who I don't know who it is, but they're always on there. Yeah. All right, look, I'm conscious of time, so let's kick off. So welcome all to this week's MX5 Sales Machine LinkedIn Live event. We have a very, very special guest today. She is someone who I connected with on LinkedIn fairly recently. We've been engaging a little bit back and forth through chat, through our content and so on. And I just thought, have to get her on as a guest. And it seemed like the feeling was mutual. So this is Charlotte Lloyd. Welcome, Charlotte. How are you doing?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So cut straight to the chase with you. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand that your journey through sales has evolved over the years, and especially in COVID times. I know you've had to adapt to virtual selling and the world of Zoom and what we're doing right now. So could you maybe just tell us a bit about, your journey to date and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in sales now for almost 20 years, very long time. Very different when I first started out to what it is now. I actually made a conscious decision to go into sales. So my background was languages, speak French, Portuguese, and Spanish. And I really wanted to go into sales just to first off learn more about business, but also the capabilities of, being able to max your income, sky is the limit, but also I think more and more as I got into it to be able to help clients, prospects have a better tomorrow. So, being able to take them from, say, they're struggling or having problems with some of the current service providers that they might be using, it's making sure that they, can use a new solution and drive results for their teams.
Obviously, the technology landscape has changed, and we'll get into that in a little while. But how has your overall approach evolved? I mean, I imagine over 20 years it must have, right? I know you've mentioned to me before about, initially it would have been just the generic sales pitch. Well, I'll let you speak for yourself. I mean, how has that evolved over time?
So I think when I started out in telesales, not an easy role to start in. The pitching back then was more focused on needs and benefits. So you would, call a Coca-Cola or a PepsiCo or a Danone. I was working with FMCG companies at the time, helping them with their business information analysis. You'd be asking certain questions, uncovering certain needs, and then matching, your product, talking about the benefits. And I think that still exists, but what we're seeing now is a switch to, instead of pitch-based messaging, to problem-based messaging. So what I was mentioning before, you're not going to move your prospect from the status quo until you can actually uncover genuine problems and challenges that they're having with what they're doing right now. So sales has evolved much more into that role, that realm, rather. When I first started out, obviously there was email, phone, then I moved into field sales, so getting out there, seeing people. A lot of what I did, I worked at a big brand, Financial Times, for 13 years. And all of that was phone, email, relationships. So getting out there, having meetings, attending trade shows and attending events. And obviously with the pandemic, we've seen a big switch to digital selling, digital outreach. So I had to really reinvent my whole sales process. How do you cut through the noise when, you can't, it's harder and harder to book a face-to-face meeting. Lots of events and trade shows have now disappeared. So it's been a complete journey these last 2 years, joining Investment Monitor, and a new brand. So taking, business from nowhere, selling to the same client base. I'm still sort of working with the client base that I did at Financial Times, but showing them something completely different, and moving them from that status quo, and also being able to reach out to some existing clients from where I previously worked, to new businesses who have never heard of us, and to have a face-to-face meeting with them, that wasn't going to be possible. So it's been a challenge, but I think what we're seeing now, and I mentioned to you just before we came on, Mark, is we're seeing not the death of the salesman or salesperson rather, but the death of the average salesperson. Yeah. So now there's a lot more pressure on salespeople to be more creative in their outreach. How are they going to stand out digitally from the rest of the pack?
Yeah. And so really there's at least two prongs to that, right? Because there's the adoption of the continual adoption of new tech, new tools as they come out, but also the approach. I mean, you touched on this, right? It sounds almost like a challenger type approach, isn't it? Where the problem isn't necessarily immediately evident all the time. So you need to go in. Do you find yourself, do you have to have a bit of a hypothesis first? Or like, what does that look like in terms of discovery when you're reaching out to somebody?
Yeah, I think, again, there's also a cultural element attached to this. But now, with the clients that I'm dealing with, I've spoken to probably 500 or 600 similar locations. So I'm helping locations to tell their story digitally better. Essentially, it's a MarTech solution, marketing technology. And this is something that hasn't existed for them before. I think being able to sort of speak to this many prospects and build sort of a catalogue of different issues that they're having. So what kind of challenges are they facing? What are some of their priorities? Has sort of enabled them to open up, because I'm seeing a certain pattern when I speak to clients. So when I'm prospecting to new clients, I talk about those patterns. I say, your peers in the industry are having these same issues, because that's usually, if you're talking to a CTO or, a CMO or a CSO, they're typically going to be having the same kind of issues. Yeah. So I think it's about making your prospect feel comfortable about talking about problems, perhaps, addressing them as challenges or priorities. I find that, speaking with some of my US Canadian clients, they're far more open to talking about their challenges than, say, perhaps some clients in Europe, which is totally fine. But in terms of taking on the sort of challenger role as a salesperson, you want to really show and teach your prospects something different. So they have a certain set of problems. How does your solution tailor to that? First, you might have to teach them, some new tricks. Our solution at the moment is something that's completely new, as I was saying. So it's being able to uncover those problems first, and then be able to, show the client a different way about thinking about how they do their business, and how can your solution help them to overcome some of these problems that they've been facing.
I love it. Yeah, it definitely echoes the approach that I like to take, and just the general philosophy of like, here's the common problem. Here's maybe a slightly different way of looking at it that you might not have considered. And it's not so, we use the word, it's a challenger, but it's not just saying you're doing this wrong, right? It's a slightly more sophisticated approach than that. So I heard you recently on the 0 to 5 million podcast, which was great. Now on there, you talked a little bit about, you talked about it in the context of how you open up a cold call.
Yeah.
Now, would you, I don't like to ask you to repeat what you've already shared with an audience, but would you mind just running through that quickly and what that looks like in terms of what you've just described with, highlighting a possible issue and how that ties back to what you do?
Yeah, so cold calling, first off, is not dead. I am having huge success with cold calling. I think a lot of salespeople fear cold calling, when really, with practice, it's not, if it's not something that should be feared. I think the approach has to be different. So I like to use what I call permission-based opener.
Yeah.
So I'd say, hi, Mark, I know you're not expecting my call this morning. Do you mind if I take, pardon me, a few moments to tell you why I'm calling? And you can decide if it makes sense if we should continue to speak. What's your typical reaction to that, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I'll hear you out.
Great. So typically, Mark, when I speak to sales trainers like yourself, they're focused on several priorities. So then I put a priority drop. One is to make sure that, when their teams are using new and creative strategies to be able to get their salespeople to reduce the ramp time. And then I might mention another sort of common challenge as well that might be happening in the sales training industry.
Sure.
Assuming that I'm selling sales training.
Yeah.
And then usually what happens is the person on the end of the phone will say, well, actually, both of these priorities or one of these priorities is affecting us. They might then say, who is this? And I will introduce myself. But the rationale behind starting a cold call that way is that, yes, you want to show your product, but you actually want that person to spend more time with you on the phone. So each phrase that you're saying is what we call a pattern interrupt, because 99% of people that are cold calling are going, hi, my name's Charlotte, I'm calling from Investment Monitor. Is this a good time to speak? What's your default reaction going to be to that?
Well, I'm in the middle of something, or no, I'm in a meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, or you get hung up on. Yeah. So taking this approach is far more effective because the person, the prospect that you're calling probably isn't used to hearing that. Yeah. And secondly, if you look at the psychological aspect, that person is going to be intrigued and want to know more. Probably if you were making, say, 10 calls and you got through to 4 or 5 people, which is usually my conversion rate is 40%. Around 3 people will listen for maybe a minute, 2 minutes, and you might have to book a call next week. And then you might get 1 or 2 who, will allow you to carry on speaking and tell you sort of what problems they've had. Mm. I think a lot of salespeople go into cold calling thinking that they need to pitch their product, that they need to make a sale in that moment, and it's not about that. So if you change your attitude to how you approach a cold call, then you're going to have a lot more success in being able to book the next meeting.
Yeah. Tell me if you agree with this. I think of it as just, it's an incremental thing, isn't it? You don't go with the expectation, I'm going to close a deal here. It's close for a bit of interest, a bit more interest. If it's not the best time to talk, there may be some time, like you say, next week, even if it's just 10, 15 minutes or whatever, to dig a bit deeper. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even when you have a discovery call booked, which is the first meeting, you want to be getting information from your client about what they're doing, what's working, what's not working. Yeah. On that first call, you're not selling your product. You don't know if you can. And if the client or the prospect that you're speaking to on that first call doesn't have any problems, then you want to say, well, it seems like everything's going well. I don't think I can help you here. I don't think we can help you. And what I find then is that it might be the case that you don't book a second call. Usually at that point, the prospect will then sort of open up and say, well, everything's going well, but it could be going better. Okay, so what else is happening? And, if ABC is happening, how does that affect X, Y, Z? Yeah. So I think I see too many salespeople going into, their first call and wanting to pitch the product when you haven't really earned the right to pitch the product. So earn your right by asking good questions, and then book the next meeting to, potentially go over a demo of how you can help them.
Yeah, this has just come to mind, so there's not maybe a silly thing to say, but at that early stage of the sales cycle, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like a slippery fish, right? The harder you try and grip it and pitch them and close them, the more the defenses go up or stay up, and you're just pushing them all. Yeah.
So that's another sort of technique when the client says everything's going well with my business, we're not having any challenges. Great. Well, if you're not having any challenges, then you probably shouldn't change anything. Yeah. Stay with what you're doing. It sounds like it's really working. I'm not going to recommend that you make any changes. You're entering what they call the zone of resistance.
Yes.
So the zone of resistance, normally the salesperson will try, as you were saying, Mark, to the slippery fish, try and pitch what they've got or try and sort of counteract what the prospect has said. And really that's, you want to be on the same side as the prospect. So, making them feel at ease, and, you are trying to help them at the end of the day. If the solution isn't a fit that you have, then it's not a fit. Mm-hmm. But rather than not tell them that, and, you build more trust and you build more credibility.
Love it. I love it. Yeah. And I think the zone of resistance is a bit more dignified than calling your client a slippery fish, right? So we'll go with
exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we're kind of talking a step along when we're talking about discovery and so on. So just to go back to the initial opening, the prospecting, obviously we've touched on phone to some extent. Talk to me about your thoughts around other channels. So, voice clips, video is a big one at the moment. What do you use? What do you like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm selling to quite a traditional market. Everyone's sick of getting email. Okay, it's so hard to cut above the noise with email. I still use email, and I keep my emails to 50, 125 words, just because if you see an email with paragraphs of text, what's your initial reaction to that? Well, Mark, what's your initial reaction if you get an email that looks quite long?
You don't want to know what my initial it's not positive, put it that way. Yeah,
exactly. You don't want to read it. It causes a headache. So you want to break it up, first of all, into maybe like 2 or 3 lines, a very catchy subject line, which either mentions their name, with your solution, or a recent sort of news item that you might have found. Maybe it's a personal one that you found on their social media, but something really relevant to them, not about your service or your product. I think this is where too many salespeople go in and start mentioning their product straight off. No one's interested. One of a couple of successful approaches I've had on email was by doing this. So targeting, say, a CMO or a chief business development officer, looking at their LinkedIn posts, doing a little bit of research into what they're posting about. One who I approached recently, she parked her car in the parking lot in Tennessee, and somebody bumped her car, so she left a note with her number and said, call me, I will pay for this, it's my fault. The person called her back and said, oh, don't worry about it, it happens. So I sent her an email and I mentioned the details of this post. I thought, wow, it's great to see that, there's some really good people in the world.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to reach this person, by the way, at the state of Tennessee for a long time. Wasn't getting through, tried a different number of tactics. She replied almost straight away and said, yes, let's book a call. So we had a discovery call, and we've started to make some headway. So that's one way of standing out.
Right.
Another thing I like to do is send a LinkedIn voice note. So you can send a LinkedIn voice note. It gives you a minute of talk time. And I usually send a 30 to 40 second voice note. Typically, I'll do this after I've sent an email to the prospect, and it's something different. The feedback I get mainly is that, oh, I didn't know LinkedIn voice notes existed. I'm like, yeah, it's like WhatsApp, Even sending a WhatsApp, if you are fairly well acquainted with the prospect as well, is a good move. But LinkedIn voice notes, typically, you want to start by saying, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to send you a voice note because, everybody's getting email these days, and I sent you an email and you probably haven't got it. Or if you did get it, let me know if you hated it. So again, it's creating that pattern interrupt, saying something different and not being afraid to call out the fact that the prospect could have hated getting the email or didn't read the email. And I get around about a 25 to 40% success rate on that. So I find it really, really good. InMail, nobody's really using. So yeah, with LinkedIn voice notes, you have to be connected to the person. That you can't send the voice notes on InMail. Still, it's a really unique way to stand out. Another way that I like to stand out is using video. So I think what stops a lot of salespeople using video is they think that it's a hassle to put together. It really isn't. You can send 10 to 15 videos and spend 20 minutes putting all of those videos together with the likes of Vidyard. You've got Drift, you've got Loomly. There's some really great tech tools out there that can help you do this, and they're free when you want to first start out using them. So I would typically send a 35 to 50-second video. And what Vidyard allows you to do is, with its Chrome extension, you can share the screen as you're talking. So I would appear in the corner. If I'm sending you a video, Mark, I would probably go on your LinkedIn profile and look at what you're commenting and posting about, and then pick a relevant topic that I think that you're interested in. So again, it's putting that focus on the prospect. Mark, I see you do some really good LinkedIn interview sessions. I see that you're trying to help salespeople sell better. I see that you're very passionate about the whole sales process. And then you want to be saying, typically when I speak to people in your industry, they're focused on X, Y, Z. So some of the things that you're looking at, let's book a call. And, you want to be asking to book a call, or does this make sense for us to speak?
Sure.
Look forward to hearing from you, and let's talk soon. So you want to be different. You want to stand out. You're probably not going to be setting, let's speak next week, April 13th at 10 a.m. You don't want to be sending that as a first touch on a video. What I also find works really well, because sometimes the video doesn't go through the spam filter if you're reaching out to the prospect for the first time, is when you've had maybe a couple of emails or outreaches, and then you send the video as a second or a third touch. And then that seems to have a lot more success, because it seems to somehow get through the spam filter. And again, a lot of the feedback I get is, wow, I didn't know you could send a video. Thank you for putting this together. Thanks for taking the time to put this together. So again, it's standing out and doing something different to the rest of the pack.
Well, thanks for coming. I think you've you've given a lot for people to think about there. It's interesting to hear it from somebody else, because this is stuff that I think about and do day to day, and I almost take it for granted. But just to go back to what you were saying about the death of the average salesperson, you've said that with videos, I think some people think it's a hassle to put it together, but
yeah,
what's stopping the average, let's say, salesperson from doing some of this stuff, from standing out? I don't know if that's a question that you can answer, but I mean, what's holding people back? Because there isn't a huge amount of adoption with this stuff, is there?
I don't think there is. I think in the US, there's probably a lot more. I think it's fear again. And it's also, and you see this from a sort of content creation perspective as well. When you see a lot of people not putting themselves out there on LinkedIn. I think people think that it takes a long time to put this together, to put these videos together, and it actually doesn't. Right. So it's perhaps the fear of salespeople fear coming out their comfort zone. But you can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. So you have to try something different. Yeah. When I first started sending out video messages, I was very nervous. I had to practice quite a bit. So the first week, your first video isn't going to be perfect, but get out there and do it, because when you've done about 30 or 40 of these, then it'll be a lot easier. If you can share even the prospect's website and talk about relevant news items. It really doesn't take a long time to putting emails together takes pretty much the same amount of time, unless you're using an automated email system. the videos are, they're not time consuming, and you've got to get past that fear and do something that's different.
Would you say it's also about putting together a process of like, these are the 3, 4, 5 points of personalization of research that I would typically use to put into a video? You know what I mean? So that you're not spending forever researching to find something to talk about in the video to then put it together. So that, but I suppose what I'm saying really is it's about having a process for doing it, isn't it, as well? Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean, you'd want to look at the buying triggers. So, each prospect has a certain trigger. They could have won an award. Their company could have won an award. They could have taken on new staff, created new jobs. Something topical will have happened. If not with their company, then with them. They could have won an award. They could have got promoted. So you want to look for those sort of trigger events, which then will give you the content and context for your video.
Excellent. Cool. I've got a post going out next week about trigger events, so yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Great.
Right, so we're pretty short on time, so I'd love to dig deeper, but we'll have to cut it there, I think. So I suppose in closing, Charlotte, seeing as you seem to be the kind of person that's always a student, always learning, trying new things, developing, and in the context of this tech stuff, give us a few predictions. I mean, where do you see things going over the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that salespeople will still be around. As I said, it's going to be the death of the average salesperson, not the actual salesperson, by 2035. And if you haven't read this book, Tech Powered Sales, it's a really great book. Bots will pretty much could have taken over most of salespeople's roles. Mm-hmm. At the moment, bots can't empathize. And I think that's where humanization, personalization, empathy are the 3 core elements that a human salesperson has. Ultimately, salespeople are needed to make the buying process simpler for the prospect, the client. So until a bot can do that, salespeople are still needed. But I think salespeople shouldn't be afraid of these automated trends coming. We see a lot of sales tech tools out there, not just LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but things like Gong, VanillaSoft, Outreach, SalesLoft, which are there to help the salesperson spend less time, perhaps analyzing their outreach, what they're doing, and sort of trying to interpret those results. All of these tools are there to help the salesperson be more productive so they can focus on RGAs, revenue generating activities.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, and just finally, where can people find you? Is there anything you'd like to promote? Tell us about
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Charlotte Lloyd, and yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to ask me any questions.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, thanks so much. Yeah, it's frustrating because I've got like another 20 questions I want to ask you, but we'll cut it off there.
Session.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for coming, and see you soon, Charlotte.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.